Verse 8, new gods were chosen. That's when Israel was going through very tough times. They began to worship other things and other people. New gods were chosen. And then after that, and this is interesting, verse 8, new gods were chosen. Then war was at the gates. And that has the idea that when you leave God, you can expect havoc in your life. Some people say, well, I'm going through a lot. And if you trace back, you're going through a lot. My life is in shambles. And usually you can trace it back to the fact that they have stopped fellowship and have stopped worshiping and stopped depending on God. So it's a correlation there. Tough time doesn't mean that you have left God, but when you don't have hope, it probably means that you have left God. Verse 8, new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Not a shield or spear was seen among the 40,000 Israel. That is that things were going bad. People were not, they didn't have any kind of hope, any kind of desire, any kind of future. It was bad times when Deborah came on the scene. The country was in shambles, so to speak. They didn't have any spear or shield, meaning that they weren't able to protect themselves. But then Deborah says, this is one of the things that happened. Verse 9, my heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, the volunteers among the people. Bless the Lord. When she came on the scene, the first thing she said, people volunteered to help. Volunteered to help. Tennessee is a volunteer state, I'm not sure, I guess in Revolutionary War. But volunteers sometimes, I didn't know 7% of firefighters in North Carolina were volunteer firefighters. I thought everybody got paid. Yeah, but that's not the way. But volunteers is a good thing. That means you want to and you're not getting paid to. And she said, the way we got out of our mess, people volunteer. Remember George Bush said years ago, something about 1,000 points of light, and and we got to volunteer and all that. And there's enough of food to go around in the world. If everybody gave up a sandwich, you can volunteer. And sometimes people don't. But she said not only that people volunteered, verse 10, she said, you who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpet. That means that the rich people volunteered. Those who had donkeys, those were the limousines of the day. And rich carpet, those had a nice huts. So they volunteered. And not only that, and you who travel on the road, the ones who can afford to ride on donkeys, they volunteer. It's not like the military, where most of the people who serve, except for some of maybe they go to the academy, most of the people who serve in the military are poor folk. The rich kids don't go to the military. They don't even consider it. But they love to talk about it, the guys who do go. But only about 2% of Americans, or 3% of Americans serve in the military, as opposed to in this area, we know a lot of people, but most rich kids, if you went to certain parts of the country, military would be a second thought when you got out of high school. That wouldn't even be considered. But if you are poor or marginally rich, that's the first thing you think about. And that has always been that way. It's just not in America. Those who fought in the Colosseums in Egypt, they were the slaves, weren't they? They did it for entertainment. Even in America during the Civil War, most of the Southerners were poor Southerners who didn't own slaves who fought in the Civil War. The rich whites who owned slaves, they didn't fight. They just made the poor ones think that it was their war. It's always been that way. Probably not going to change. Verse 11, at the sound of those who divide flocks among the watering places, they shall recount the righteous deeds of the Lord, the righteous deeds for his pleasantry in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the gates. There's going to be victory. She said, we had victory as we came together as a group, the rich, the poor, the volunteers, we all came together. And I think that's the way the church needs to do. everybody needs to come together. Brother McClung uses this phrase. He said, not equal gifts, but equal sacrifice. And that makes a lot of sense. We don't all have the same equal gift, but we can have the same equal sacrifice. And when the Bible talks about giving in terms of how you've been blessed or giving 10%, it's not talking about everybody giving the same amount, everybody giving the same sacrifice amount. The woman who gave a penny, she gave a greater sacrifice than the people who gave a lot, because they had a lot and they gave a little. She had a little and she gave a lot. So it's not about how much you give, it's your sacrifice. And so they all chopped in to help out, and Deborah was the leader of the clan at the time. Verse 12, the Bible says, Deborah, awake, sing a song, arise, Barak. Barak was her commander-in-chief, and take away your captives. Then survivors came down to the nobles. The people of the Lord came down to me as warriors. She said they all came out to fight. This is what's called unifying, and people working together. Ephraim came out. Look at verse 14. Those whose root is in Amalek came down. They fought. Ephraimites. She says in verse 14, Benjamin, your people came out. Malchi, your people came out. Zebulun, those who wielded the staff of office. That is, those who were office men or women. They were not so-called fighters. They came out. So everybody came out to fight and to help Israel win. This is a good way of people uniting for a purpose. When we started our capital campaign way back in the 2007, 2008, I remember we were meeting over there. We were talking about getting monies, and people join in, and everybody said, we'll give so much. That's how you do. And so everybody's working together, because they had an army that had been depressing, had been beating them up for 20 years. Look at chapter 4, verse 3. It said, the sons of Israel cried to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed the sons of Israel severely for 20 years. And so now, after 20 years of suppression, everybody came together to fight this enemy. And that's what we need to do, is come together as a people, as a family, as a person. House divided, and that is people. But a double-minded person, that is one person. You got to get yourself together first. You know, it's almost like, well, we got a messed up world, but if you messed up, how can you help the world? So you got to get yourself together, and when you get yourself together, you can help somebody else out. You put on your mask first, or your jacket first. And then it says in verse 15, to win this war, the princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Issachar was with Barak. In the valley, they rushed into the hills. And then we get to verse 16, the latter part of verse 15. She mentions Reubens. Among the divisions of Reubens, they were great resolves of heart. You see that in verse 15? They were great resolve. The Reubenites they thought about it. They cared. They said, we care. They were resolved. There are people who say they care, but they don't do anything. They don't give as they should. They don't support as they should, but they say they care. And the Reubenites, they had great resolve of heart. The heart was big. But she says in verse 16, she said to the Reubenites, why did you sit among the sheepfolds? Why did you stay at home while we went out fighting if you care so much? You sat there to hear the piping of the flock. Among the division of the Reuben, they were great searchers of the heart. Oh, we care. We care. We want to help out. We love the church. You don't give time, your talent, your treasure. Yeah. And then she said there was another group. Now, she didn't mention this in chapter 4 when they were fighting. In chapter 4, it seemed like everybody worked together. But when she went back, she said, wait a minute, there were some who didn't support us. But she didn't mention that during the fight. She mentioned that after the fight. The reason is that you don't let someone stop you. But after it's over, you can make an assessment. But during the fight, you don't think negative. You just say, we're going to win. So she doesn't say anything about the Reubenites or the Ephraimites or Asher or Dan or anything. But she just say, we went in and we won the battle. But now after it was over, she wrote down who really did not support. And she talks about the volunteers first. But look at verse 17 of chapter 5. Gilgad remained across Jordan. They didn't come. They stayed in Jordan. Or look at Dan in verse 17. And why did Dan stay in the ships? Dan lived on the coastline. They didn't get out their ships. Look at verse 17 again. Asher sat at the seashore and remained by its landing. And so they didn't get out. All the negative things, people who did not support, we know now. But during the fight, we had no idea that there were people who were against her. The idea is you don't give devil credit while you're going through. And when God gives you the victory, you can always look back, but don't give the devil credit. So, if you get, let's say if you're a choir and you get ready to sing a song and you got 3 or 4 people missing in your choir. And so you get up there and say, well, we're getting ready to sing, but we got so-and-so missing. He had it. Just don't do that. Just sing the song. And after you sing, you say, and by the way, we did have a couple people missing, but we hope you enjoyed it. But don't say it in the beginning. You're giving devil victory. You don't say, well, somebody get rid of, well, we only have a couple people at church, so well, go ahead and preach. Then after, say something. Don't give the devil the victory in the beginning. Deborah didn't complain in the beginning about who was missing, but afterwards she was a realist. She knew people were not there, but she didn't complain about it. So you give yourself a positive. You get up in the morning and don't say, "Oh, I'm not going to make it." Get up in the morning and say, "I'm going to have a great day." Now, at the end of the day, you may have a lousy day, and you can think about it, but don't get up in the morning and say, "I'm going to have a lousy day." Then she goes back to what was positive. Look at verse 18. She says, Zebulun was a people who despised their lives even to death. They fought until death. So in the midst of those who didn't help, she talks about those who did. And Naphtali also, verse 19, the kings came and fought, and they fought the kings of Canaan. And they took no plunder in silver. They fought, but they didn't take any. They didn't get any rewards for it. But then in verse 20, she tells us how they won the battle. This great battle. Now go back to chapter 4, verse 3. You got to remember that. Chapter 4, verse 3 holds the key. Chapter 4, verse 3. The sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, because Jabin the king had 900 chariots. 900 chariots. That was like 900. What's the tanks? Yeah, tanks against foot soldiers. 900 chariots, and so they had a modern army. They did not think they could win. And so you can imagine why some people said this is useless. We only got foot soldiers and they got 900 chariots. How can we win? And so go back to chapter 5, verse 20. God already has a plan of victory. Now, how did they win the battle? We see in verse 20 and 21 what happened for them were able to come those 900 chariots. Israel didn't have any chariots. They only had foot soldiers. And it seems like odds are against you. The devil is just too much. You got too many problems, too much going on. Not enough money. whatever the case may be. But Deborah says in verse 20 of chapter 5, the stars fall from heaven. The stars meaning the angels or God. And in some kind of way, there was a divine intervention. God fought our battle. Is that the key? God fought our battle. And this is how she says God fought their battle. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. He was a king. And then she says in verse 21, the torrent of Kishon swept them away. Now, Kishon was a little stream, a brook, about 10 feet wide. But when the stars, meaning the rains, came and flooded the brook and become, rather than 10 feet wide, it became 100 feet or maybe 100 yards wide. Who knows? It became a rushing river. And when the chariots went down to the river, 9,000 chariots went down to 900 chariots went down to the river to cross. They thought they were going to cross a little brook, but they didn't realize it was a raging river, and they got stuck. All those 900 chariots of the enemy got stuck in the river. And it says, the stars, verse 20, the stars fall from heaven. Verse 21, the torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishon. O my soul, march on with strength. Verse 22, the horse's hoof beat from the dashing of his violent sneeze. In other words, the horses got stuck in the mud. And the men on the chariots had to get off the chariots because the horses got stuck. When they got off, they were not infantry. They couldn't fight that way. And so Israel was infantry. Now it was infantry against guys who didn't know how. Who against Urban, I guess, maybe. Who knows? But anyway, it was infantry against Urban. And now Israel won. Because when they got off the horses, chariots, they didn't know what to do. Because they never been infantry. And they lost the battle. Israel won the battle. And the key is that the stars, verse 20, the stars fall from heaven. God gave them the victory over the 900 chariots that were stuck in the mud. Now verse 23, she talks about those who did not help again. We talked about Reuben and Gad and Dan, those who did not help. She said, curse Meroz. Meroz is a city, but it's sort of like it's sort of an example of people who did not help. She said, curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, utterly curse its inhabitants, because look at verse 23, because they did not come to help of the Lord. You know, everybody sometimes wants a piece of the pie, but how many people want to help cook the pie? You remember that the chicken, was the chicken little who went around asking everybody to help out, and then nobody would help, but when she cooked the pie, everybody wanted to bite. Little red hen, yeah. Yeah, everybody wanted to bite. And so she said, curse those who did not help, because they did not help. And how many people were, whoa, look what we did. What, we? Kemosabe, we? And so curse don't mean in a bad way, like you got a curse on you. It means that you won't benefit, you won't be blessed if you don't help out when everybody's contributing. And everybody doesn't contribute. We talk about church now. Everybody doesn't contribute in church equally sacrifice. We know that. If everybody gave their equal sacrifice, not equal gift, equal sacrifice, you would never have to ask for anything. Volunteers, time, treasure, you wouldn't have to ask for anything if everybody gave equally. But people don't. But if somebody's, but I guarantee you that person who may not give equally, if the air is not on, they'll be the first person to say, turn up there, turn up there. Yeah. So it won't be in a bad way. What will happen is that your life won't be you won't have a beneficial life. I don't think it means that you will have a curse on you like a mark of Cain or something. But it goes on to say in verse 24. No, verse 23, because they did not come out to help the Lord against the warriors. In verse 24, it says, bless the women of Jeriah. Now, Jeriah was the woman who killed Sisera with the tent peg. So she did not have to fight. She did not have to fight because she was a lady, but she did. And so Deborah said, bless her, the wife of Heber. Now, Heber didn't fight. She did not get the support of her husband, but she still fought. Then Deborah says, blessed is she of the women in the tent. She was in the house when Sisera came up to her and asked for some place to hide. And she gave him some warm milk. And then she killed him, the king, the army general rather. And it says, bless him, bless her rather, because she did her job. Now that means that bless means probably that, oh, how happy. That means that she probably lived happily ever after, even though she may have had some problems, she lived happily ever after. And then in verse 25, it tells us how she lured him into his fatality. He asked for water and she gave him milk. Now, milk may have been a sedative or it may have been something more inviting. But he asked, give me a drink of water. And she said, oh, no, get some milk. And so that meant that he felt comfortable. In the magnificent bowl, she brought him curds, just sort of warm milk. And verse 26, and she reached out her hand for the tent peg and her right hand for the worksman hammer. Now, the women were the ones who kept the house together, and the men would go out hunt, and the women would fight the cattle. I mean, they would go out and the men would hunt rather, and the women would take care of the house, and they would construct a tent. So she was familiar with working with the tent peg and a hammer. And so when he came in and she gave him some warm milk, the Bible says, verse 26, then she struck Sisera, she smashed his head, and she shut up and pierced his temple. She just gave him the biggest headache of his life. And then it goes on to say, now we didn't get this in chapter 4, but Deborah just wants us to know that this lady did a great job. Deborah says in verse 27, between her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay. Between her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell dead. So she describes how you got to kill the enemy. Some people just want to play with the enemy. You know, a guy, if he's having trouble with alcohol or something, he'll pour out half of it, but he leave a half a bottle just in case. You're having trouble with cigarettes, you throw out your case of cigarettes, but you leave one just in case of butt. You know, you're having trouble with your little black book, you throw your little black book away, but you leave a name written in your hand just in case. You got to kill the devil completely. And so we see that Deborah tells us she hit him in the head, he fell, where he bowed, and she made sure he was dead. So you got to kill the devil completely. You can't play with it. You just can't play with him. You got some sin in your life, put it to death before it does what? Put you to death. Put you to death. Put it to death before it puts you to death. And that's the idea here. That don't mean you may not have problems, but you just make up your mind. This I'm going to overcome. I cannot allow this in my life, because sin, if it's not killed, will raise its ugly head again. The only way it doesn't raise up again is dead. You got to kill it. You got to kill it through the power of the Lord. Out of the one, then she says it. Then she changes and she talks about the guy we was talking about just died. Then she talks about his mother. See, every criminal has a family. We don't want to think that. Sometimes we think people who are criminals don't have families. So we don't want to think that. You know, we don't want to think that it's almost like the kids at the border. You can dehumanize people almost like slaves. Well, you can sell the children as slaves because they don't have family. Every person has family. The kids at the border in America or wherever, you separate the kids, but their moms care about them just as much as anything else. Now, how they got here is a whole story. But you think, well, let's separate the kids. Don't you think that mom over there is thinking about that kid that she hasn't seen in 2 months? Of course she is. But what the country think, well, you know, and we don't care. We make excuses. Well, we'll reunite them when we get a chance. Or we get DNA tests. Because they don't think like they're people. When you dehumanize a person, you can do anything. You can do them like a dog. Yeah. So you can do that, and so you dehumanize, and you don't think. But if you thought, boy, that mom must really be caring about her son, you couldn't sleep at night till you made sure they were united. But we come up with excuses because we can dehumanize folk, because that's what we do sometimes. But and all over the world, not just here, all over the world. So Sisera had a family, and his mother. Look at verse 28. And out of the window she looked and lamented. That was his mother. Now he's dead. She doesn't know that. The mother Sisera through the lattice, why does his chariot delay in coming? He always goes out and he comes back with, you know, stuff. And she probably was a crook like he was, maybe, who knows. But she's saying he always comes back and brings me something after he goes out and robbing and killing. And so she's looking for something. And she said, why do the hoof prints of his chariot tarry? And then, of course, the women who supported him, you know, supported her rather. And you want to have people around you that are not always yes people. You do want to have people in your inner circle who will say no. You know, remember Mike Tyson when he, you know, and maybe guys that are a lot of money and stuff like that. You just don't want to have people who always say yes to you, because your inner circle, you got to be somebody who say, got to tell you no, that's not a good idea. And so these women said, the princess said to the mom who was worrying about her son, her wise and said, oh, indeed, she repeats herself to words. And she said, are not they finding out they are divided? He said, he's out there because he's dividing the spoil. Or a maiden, 2 maidens on every warrior. Now, in those days, when you killed the men, you got the women. And they were saying, oh, he's just having a good time with the women, but he'll be back sooner or later. Or it says to Sisera, a spoil of dyed work embroidered. Dyed work of double embroidered on the neck of the spoil. In other words, he's bringing you something. He's bringing you something back. He's going to get something for you. So they sort of encourage her that everything's going to be all right. But what he had been doing to others had just gotten done to him. He had been out killing, and now he has been killed. And they were expecting a great victory, but there was no victory to be had. So what goes around does what? Comes around. There was no victory to be had. And then Deborah concludes in verse 31. She said, thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord. Let all your enemies perish, O Lord. That's a good prayer. Let all your enemies perish. When you use the word let has the idea of let up. You know, somebody, you say, let me go. That means somebody's holding you. Let's get out of here. It means somebody's stopping you back. So when you use the word let, it all has the idea that something is holding you back. Let go. And so thus let all your enemies perish. oh Lord, just let him go, let him go. And then she says this, which I think is beautiful, and let those who love him, meaning the Lord, let those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might, be as bright as the sun. Let your light so shine before men that you may see his good work and do what? Glorify his Father in heaven. And so after that, Deborah and Jael and Barak, the land was undisturbed for how long? 40 years. After that, the land was undisturbed for 40 years. And so that's the commentary to chapter 4, the song. And this was a song, by the way. And so they were singing. Now I don't know how it went to music. Maybe they didn't have any music. I don't know. But they were singing this. And why did the people teach so much in songs, S-O-N-G-S? Why was things taught in songs? Because when you learn a song, it helps your what? Your memory. If someone said, memorize that, this whole book, this whole page right here, you said, man, I can't memorize that. But if I say, well, how about singing this next week? You learn it. So we learn better by you hear sometimes where kids say, man, I just can't remember anything. And then you hear them sing a song, they were just singing the whole verse. You know, you can't remember history. You can sing 20 verses at one time. Of course you can. Yeah. My dad used to say when he couldn't, he said, you get old, you can't remember anything. He loves to watch soap operas. And I would ask him about the soap operas, who were married to whom, and he could know list. I said, you can remember that. If you can remember that, you can remember something else. So it's not that you can't, it's that you don't want to. Yeah. If you can remember all the names on a soap opera, you can remember scripture, can't you? Yeah, I hear a lot of people say I can't remember scripture. I just can't remember scripture. But you ask them something, repeat a verse, a song, or something, they can remember that. So anyway, okay, we're going to stop here. We don't have time to get chapter 6 and 7 and 8 talks about Gideon. Let me see, anything I got it. Gideon, let's see, we'll get that next week. We'll try to get chapter 6 and 7 next week. We start on time because we have more written about Gideon than any other judge in the Bible. Any other judge. Now, Samson has a lot written about him, but Gideon has a little bit more. Gideon was the next guy. Gideon is interesting. He was a good guy that made bad decisions. Now, in the beginning, you see all the good he did, but in the end, he made bad decisions. We don't normally talk about how good people do bad things. Gideon was a good person who did bad things. Now, it didn't look like they were bad things, but they were. For instance, they said, Gideon, we want to make you king. And Gideon said, no, I don't want to be king. I don't want to be king. But I want your money. He wanted to live like a king, but he didn't want to be king. Yeah, so yeah, because he knew being a king was wrong. But he wanted to live like a king. And living like a king, he messed up his family. So we'll talk about Gideon next week. We got 4 chapters on Gideon. It's going to be an interesting study. So if you're watching by Facebook or YouTube, either one, you want to get our Bible study on Gideon. So now the questions of chapter 5. They're online, aren't they? Does everyone have a copy? Brother Jordan, you got any? Okay, let me go online real quick and pull them up. If you're watching by way of social media, go to New Life Bible Church INC and go to Bible Study Notes. And when you got more notes and see chapter 5 And we see the questions. I'll read the first question. Besides the Lord and Deborah's leadership, what was another key to Israel's victory in verse 2 of chapter 5? What was another key to their victory? Besides the Lord and her leadership. Volunteers. Volunteers are important. I tell you, boy, in church, people volunteer. It's the best thing in the world when someone calls for a pastor, say, Pastor, you need any help? I'll volunteer. I called someone last week to ask to go do something, and they just did it right away. It's the best thing in the world. Who should be the object of our praise and worship? Verse 3. When we have praise and worship, who should be the object? Right, not the audience. Sometimes we praise and worship to who? For the audience. You know, we want to make the audience get up and, no, we are praising and worshiping for the Lord. He should be the object of our worship. Question number 3, what verb tense is Deborah singing? Verses 4 through 6. What verb tense is she singing prior to the fight? Is it I will sing? Is that past or future tense? Yeah. Yeah. That's past tense, isn't it? Future tense. Past tense. Yeah, as if it had already happened. Yeah. And what ignite her praise? What God was going to do. Verse 4 say, Lord, when you went out, and when you marched, all the verse, and when the earth quaked, past tense. So she's praising God for the things that he has done. Question number 4, what does Deborah say about herself in verse 7? She's a mother. And sometimes we think, well, I'm just a mom. What can I do? My goodness. And we know she had a husband. And so God can choose the wife and not choose the man, can he? Yeah. So yes, he can. Sometimes he chooses a white man. So God can go in the house and choose whomever he will. Sometimes God doesn't choose a husband or the wife or the first 7 sons. He'll wait and choose the 8th son. That was David. So God chooses whomever he will. He knows exactly. Question number 5. What is the result of turning away from the Lord? Verse 8. What's the result of turning away from the Lord? War. Yeah, war. It could be an internal war. You have war within your own self. It could be a war within your family. It could be a war within the country or the state. It's always war. It starts with self and it goes to family, community, church, whatever. Yeah, when we turn away from the Lord, we can expect that. Question number 6. How does today's volunteer armed service recruits different from Deborah's time? I just threw that. That's a subjective question. So, say what? What?
Only the less fortunate, the non-rich serve.
Yeah. It seemed like everybody served here, but today most rich kids don't serve in the military. I know you don't think that, but most of them don't. Now some of them do because of honor and all that. You always have an exception, but most of them, the high rich people, just don't serve in the military. It's just the way it is. Yeah, and they choose, and they don't. Well, they have the option of serving too, don't they?
Yeah, but I'm saying that I know when I joined, I didn't have too many options.
Well, maybe that's why I am. Okay, don't have options. Yeah. Yeah. So if you had options, you wouldn't have served either. Well, let's don't blame the rich kids then. I'm sorry, rich kids. We don't blame you. I guess next time you say, well, I have other options. That's why I didn't serve. Okay. I'm glad we're not all rich. We have a bad country. Back to the draft. I do know this. The poor people were not the ones who entered the draft. The rich. Question number 7. What cliche can be applied to Reuben, Asher, Dan's behavior? Remember, they are the ones who did not participate. What cliche can be applied to their behavior? They did not participate. Who wrote this? Somebody sang us, "What have you done for me lately?" And they're nothing, right? That's a cliche. What have you done for me lately, Reuben? Gad? Asher? Nothing. Don't ask me to explain it. Okay, revisit verse 3 of chapter 4. Remember, we talked about that a lot. Iron chariots, 900 of them. How did God help them defeat the 900 iron chariots? Yeah, the rains came and flooded the creek into a large river, and the chariots got stuck. And they were going down as if it was just going to ride across like they did probably many times, but they didn't realize what had happened. And so God can sometimes make a way out of what? What contrast do you see in verses 23 and 24? Verse 23, we see what? The word what? In verse 24, we see the word bless. And those who help were cursed, and those who help not were cursed, and those who helped were blessed. Yeah. Question number which one? See, Sarah's death is given to us again in slow motion. Remember we said she fell and all that. Who is lamenting in verse 28? His mother. His mother. Now, I'm not saying that his mother was a good person. I don't know that. But bad people can care about their kids, can't they? Yeah. 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 Question number 11. How do her maids try to comfort her in verse 20? Verse 30, rather. By telling her what?
He's probably out getting padded on her. It's a beautiful garment for him. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, that's right. You're right. He's out doing something. Well, that's what it says. What it says, a maiden or two for every warrior. Yeah, they could get the spoils. What cliche can be applied to his situation? And what's happened to him? And what happened to him, rather? What goes around comes around. How many mothers have waited for their loved ones and they didn't come back because of him? So sometimes, if you the same people you meet on your way up, sometime are what? Right, same people meet on your way down, and so you should always care. If you don't want bad things to happen to you, you should try not to have bad things happen. What happens to God's enemies, and what happens to those who love Him? Verse 31. Right. I like the last part. It says what? But those who love him be like the what? Can you imagine the height of the sun shining at its peak, bright and warm? But said those who love the Lord will be bright and warm. They will be at its peak, just shining beautifully. But you look up a beautiful star, the way you can appreciate the sun is look at the stars at night, because that's what the sun is doing. S-U-S-O-S-U-N. And so if you see a beautiful star at night, that's how the sun is shining. Now, if our sun, because the stars are so much further away, but can you imagine if we could see our sun at night, which is a lot closer than the closest star? It would be a big bright light in the sky. And so, but anyway, you would be a big bright light. How can you get your name in lights? I was going to tell somebody that the other day. How can you get your name in lights?
I don't know, Pastor. How can I get my name in lights?
Well, change the exit. Change your name to exit to be in lights. But
Signs always lit up.
see, Ike was a plant. You always have somebody in the audience who can help you out. I had to get that one out. I heard that one on radio or something. I don't know. So I had to get it out. How you like that, Sister Ellis? Was that okay for you? Yeah. It was not. You just saying that because you care about me. Anyway, Sister Ellis, any closing thoughts?
I like verse 20 when it said,